Hey guys, what's going on? We are at Nintendo Cade and Nintendo Cade Evelyn's house right now. I have a great surprise for you guys. I've been promising you guys a Zelda timeline. I said it's going to take a year. So I have the definitive edition done in less than 10 minutes. I'm going to go through the entire actual real Legend of Zelda timeline. Behind the camera is my camera assistant, CND.
What's good?
And what we have below is the actual timeline. I'm going to go through every one of the games to actually explain why the timeline is in this particular order. So let's get it started. All right. The first thing we have to understand how time flows. Anyone ever played the game, The Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver? If you've ever played that game, whether it's Blood Omen, Soul Reaver, or the Defiance, you'll notice that Kain says time is a stream. It can be broken, but it can also be reconnected.
History is irredeemable. Drop a stone into a rushing river. The current simply courses around it and flows on as if the obstruction were never there. You and I are pebbles, Raziel, and have even less hope of disrupting the time stream. The continuum of history is simply too strong, too resilient. Except, then how do we explain William here? The beloved boy king turned tyrant. In my youth, I witnessed William's rise to power and his transformation into the nemesis who laid waste to Nosgoth. Keep your distance, King. Years later, I stumble upon a chance to journey back in history, unaware that the entire affair has been carefully orchestrated by Mobius. In my wisdom, I seize this opportunity to murder the young king before he can ravage Nosgoth, and thereby provide the catalyst Mobius needs to ignite a genocidal war against our race.
I warn you, no further.
This one reckless act unravels the skein of history. The nemesis never becomes the nemesis. William dies a martyred saint. I, the vampire assassin, become the author of my own species' extinction, and Mobius profits from it all. I destroyed a tyrant only to create one far worse. But how can it be so? How, if history is immutable? The answer is here in this room, Raziel. Mobius propelled William and me together, but ensured first that we were both armed with the Soul Reaver. The Reaver is the key. Two incarnations of the blade meet in time and space. A paradox is created, a temporal distortion powerful enough to derail history.
And that's exactly how the Legend of Zelda timeline works. So we're going to first start with Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword is the actual beginning of the Legend of Zelda. It tells the entire lore, it sets up everything, it brings in demise, it brings in the entire legacy, and it comes all the way down here. So when you start from Skyward Sword, the very next game in that timeline is the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time is the second game. Now a lot of people say, no, that's not true. If you look at Hyrule Historia, forget about Hyrule Historia. I'm going to correct it to make sure this fits. Everyone knows the Legend of Ocarina of Time and how it actually works. Link meets Ganon, Zelda, warns Zelda, introduces Link to Ganon. They give him the Ocarina. He uses the pull the sword out of the Temple of Time. He goes into the future. He sets up the future, defeats Ganon, and then Zelda makes a big mistake. This is called the Divergence. With the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, this is actually the divergence in the actual timeline. When Zelda sends Link back in time, she creates a divergence in time because the timeline that Link existed in the future continues to go on but does not have Link there. So she sends Link back in time, and by sending Link back in time, this is how you move on with the main timeline and the divergence timeline. But we're going to take a pause in the main timeline, or we're going to call this prime time. Get it? Right. So now, So in the Divergence now, the next game starts is The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. If you read the intro or listen to the intro in The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, they tell you about a legend of a boy clad in green who came a long time ago, fought off Ganon, and vanished. And this is what makes this new timeline exist. The reason why that boy vanished is because Zelda sends this kid back to his actual timeline. And this is how Wind Waker continues to go on. Ganon is well aware of who Link is because he has a Triforce of Power. And by having a Triforce of Power, he's all-knowing, all-existing. But that's another thing. So moving on in the Divergence timeline right after that is Phantom of the Hourglass. You guys are going to notice something about the Divergence timeline. They all have a theme. Most of the games, in fact, all of the games are cel-shaded, right? So Phantom of the Hourglass is pretty self-explanatory. It goes with the timeline. After the water drains up, then you have The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks. And somewhere in here, you can put Zelda track, Tetra trackers if you want. It's whatever. But that's they all are up on this top timeline in the Divergence. After this, then the world settles in and you have Minish Cap. And in Minish Cap, they tell a lore that doesn't really make sense to a lot of Zelda people because they're like, wait, it doesn't make sense. They're saying since the beginning of time or whatever. That's because this is in its own timeline, in the Divergence timeline. So the Divergence timeline has its own past since it was made. And this is due to the mistake that Zelda made. Then, after that, we go here to The Legend of Zelda Four Sword Adventures. Now, this is a very important game. We're going to pause right here because we're going to get back to this. Because something happens in this game where if you listen to the part in Legacy of the King Soul Reaver, it's called the Convergence. We're going to get back to that. So we're going to pause this. So let's go back to Prime Time. All right? Now, back in the Prime Time, after Link comes back from his timeline, he meets Zelda for a second time in Hyrule Castle in Ocarina of Time. But this time he has a Triforce on his hand. He warns Zelda of what Ganon's going to do, etc., etc. Zelda then gives him the Ocarina and tells him, get out of here. We'll take care of Ganon before Ganon starts an uprising. Link then goes back to the Lost Woods with the Ocarina, and that's how he runs into the Skull Kid. They take his Ocarina. He runs into this wormhole or whatever you want to call it, and he goes to Termia, and Link is no longer in Hyrule during the time of Hyrule's events. While Link is playing around with the moon over there, Hyrule kept going on. Now after Majora's Mask is done, Link returns from Termia, right? And he's a young kid and he gets to relive his life all over again. There's a break in between and he doesn't see Zelda since. So based on his timeline, Link has only seen Zelda 3 times in his life. The first time in Ocarina of Time when he's a kid, when he becomes young Link, well, adult Link in the future of Ocarina of Time, which then leads into the Divergence, and when he comes back and he sees Zelda again and he warns her. So now in Hyrule Warriors are paradox games. These are time holes are opening in Hyrule, and the purpose of the game is to use the Triforce to seal the time holes. What do you call it again? You have Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, which is the present, Skyward Sword is the past, and then Twilight Princess is the future. 3 time holes open. You have to do a bunch of things in the games to seal off the time. Characters from throughout the entire Zelda cosmos come through in the game. Tetra, even from Wind Waker, is even there. Everybody's in there, so it makes sense. This is called a paradox. If Link did not stop the time hole from happening, what would happen is that time would fix the irritants. You guys will know what I'm talking about when you watch Legacy of King Soul Reaver. Well, after that, Link, a new game comes out. This is the new Link. This is Twilight Princess Link. This is the descendant of the Hyrule Warriors Link, which is the same one from Majora's Mask, which is the same one from Ocarina of Time. That Link becomes a hero of shade in this game. And this is a brand new Link in the Descendant timeline, and that's how you have Twilight Princess, right? Twilight Princess then comes over. This is the most important as we're going to wrap up this timeline. The Four Swords Adventures. So in Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, it tells you time will correct itself when 2 incarnations of the same thing happening in time happens at the same time. So
2 incarnations of the blade meet in time and space. A paradox is created, a temporal distortion powerful enough to derail history.
So while Four Swords Adventures was going on here, Palace of the Four Swords was in Link's Awakening, and 4 swords was happening. So it's a total of like literally 4 links in one time, 4 links in another time, all doing something similar, which merges the timeline together. This is now called the convergence. Don't believe me? Watch Rick and Morty.
Shut up! Oh crap, are you kidding me? 2 dots? This never needs to be more than 1 dot. Our time is fractured. You two somehow created a feedback loop of uncertainty that split our reality into 2 equally possible impossibilities. 1 dot, motherfucker!
Yes!
Yeah!
Yes!
So now, after this, the true sequel to The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past with 4 Swords is A Link Between Two Worlds. This story is self-explanatory, right? Because that's actually a continuation of links, so these are like the same links. Then you have Triforce Heroes, which is yet another spin-off of the whole, multiple links and whatnot, standalone adventure. Then you come to Seasons of Ages, and Seasons of Age, The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, right? So you have these 2 games. This is where the Triforce takes Link, sends him off to a far land to stop an evil force with Ganon, etc., etc. When you beat the game, Link gets a kiss from Zelda, and he gets on a boat to sail back to Hyrule, and that's the exact end of the game. And the beginning of this game, The Legend of Zelda: A Link's Awakening, is Link sailing back to Hyrule in a boat, and he gets hit by a violent storm which destroys his ship, and he's rendered unconscious in the sea for who knows however long. While that's going on, Southern Hyrule is being ransacked, right? And as Southern Hyrule is being ransacked, Zelda 1 happens. When you beat the game, The Legend of Zelda: A Link's Awakening, you'll notice Link does not have his sword. He has a shield and a raft. In the beginning of this game, you start out 3 stages away from the shorelines of Southern Hyrule, meaning he came out from the actual ocean. Link's sword is gone, and what happens when a soldier dies in war, just like in, what's the name of this game here? The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, they bury your sword in a grave. The Master Sword, which at that time was called the Magical Sword, is found where? The graveyard. After you beat Ganon, you destroy his actual body, so Ganondorf is actually dead now. And all that exists is the spirit of demise. In The Legend of Zelda, well, it's not called The Legend of Zelda, it's called Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. The legend is over. With the legend being over now, they try to resurrect Ganon's body. If you look at the very end of the game, there's a small little Kokiri elf. That's Mido. For some reason, he did not let the grudge go. And I don't even know how Mido lived that long throughout all of time. But somebody had to let Ganon into the Deku Tree. And there was only one person guarding it. And that's Mido. So Mido made a deal with Ganon for all his power to live throughout all this time. And he wanted to get his revenge on Link in The Adventures of Link. They try to resurrect Ganon's body in the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird is destroyed. Mido uses the Shadow Link against him. Link defeats him. Mido finally dies. Link saves Hyrule. All is well. In between that, now we have the adventures. I put this little tab here because I know no one wants to actually see this. This is the cartoons. This is the CDI games and so forth. This is a time in Hyrule where Ganon's at his weakest. And for many, many years, Ganon just doesn't do anything. He actually stores up his power. And then, 10,000 years later, Ganon finally has enough power, enough malice to ransack Hyrule in the war that is known in the greatest Zelda game of all time, Breath of the Wild. And you guys know how this adventure goes. And that is the Legend of Zelda timeline.
Yay! Woo!
Do it again.
No!